Learning Unit 2, Theme 1, Learning Outcome 1.4. Our outcomes today is to explain how language is related to power with reference to the social positions and communication strategies that can be adopted. We're also going to discuss multilingualism, the interpretation and translation as processes of acknowledging and accommodating language differences within South African and international contexts. Let's begin. So here on page 98 of the textbook, they're just talking about how language is used and how words and meanings have power, especially in social relations that are part of our interaction here. For example, managers and personnel may use the same words, but the meanings are communicated very differently. A manager and a worker may refer to the company staff as family, but to the manager, this might mean one big happy family, while the disgruntled employee may mean this is a dysfunctional family. To some extent, the difference is due to the power differences between the manager and the worker. Language, therefore, is related to ideology and how we idealize that word and a carrier of ideology. The ideologies is from the dominant culture usually are very often relayed through language and can be observed specifically in the political speeches. So here they're just talking about when we're delivering a speech, how words have such effect in political speeches and those ideas that are inserted in them, such as comrades, poverty elevation, emancipation, empowerment, and so on. And that words, especially in political speeches, have impact. And do they still have impact? If people, especially in sort of higher positions, do what they say, at least, still have weight? Do they still mean what they say? Are they now more powerful than ever because they serve in that, existing power relations higher? They just go on to more into the section in terms of introduction that language is just very powerful. It's very powerful in terms of even saying the words I do in a marriage carries weight. It has power. Being called names is hurtful. And they just go into more examples there. Within this section, we show how language is related to social position and how it's used by co-cultural groups. And co-cultural groups, which you should just note here, means people that are, or groups at least, they're not part of the dominant society. So we have within our society a dominant cultural group that, exists. And then there's these co-cultural groups, which are the minority of the dominant or majority cultural group there. Language and social position. Over here, we first can note that we have individuals that occupy social positions, and there are also these social constructs there, such as assumptions about gender, race, class, age, and sexuality, and so on. The different positions can also help our understanding of the communication there, and not all positions within society are therefore also equivalent, because not everyone is the same in the organizational hierarchy, as it were. Power is a central element within social positions because the judge in a court will have a higher sort of ranking in the social structure. So sometimes where an individual occupies in the hierarchy, their words are just going to have more power than those that are lower. So they're saying here that when a judge speaks, it's going to carry much weighting than when your neighbor speaks, because you might feel that there's more equal status there. So this is just to do with individuals, at least in an organizational, at least a societal, sort of hierarchy. Moving on from that, we can also note that groups hold different positions in society, going back to dominant cultural groups and the co-cultural groups. What you can note right now is we can say that groups that hold the most power are those that are managers, politicians. They have noted here men as well, heterosexuals, and a ruling political party that occupy a majority in the society. And then we could say the co-cultural group would be the ethnic and the minorities, such as women and homosexuals, who might not represent the entire society there and therefore need a more, a majority space. We could then also call them non-dominant groups because they're struggling, trying to adapt to the dominant cultural group. They have their own communication. How can they communicate in their own style as well? And then we have an example from Julius Malema that you can just read out by yourself, which carries on at the bottom of page 98 to 99. Moving on from this now, how can co-cultural groups relate to the more powerful dominant groups? What can they do to not really, we have to say, have to adapt or separate or accommodate, but how can they relate to the dominant cultural groups? So we do try to answer this as well, that there is a way that the culture groups can emphasize assimilation, which is maybe they should just become part of the dominant group. Secondly, maybe they should try to accommodate or adapt to the group. And lastly, should they just separate from the group? Of course, there's costs and benefits to each one of these strategies. And then you can also read out the example on page 99, which is Nick and James. And how does the society look at the homosexual relationship? Should they try to become part of the dominant group and the ideologies? Should they try to adapt to the group, or should they try to separate? Please look at the table 5.6, which is at the bottom of your page 99, which is to say that here we have our separation, accommodation, and assimilation strategies. They can either do this in terms of these three strategies in these orientations in a non-assertive, assertive, or aggressive manner. And these are all the communication orientations that we will go into. So just to put it once again very plainly, we have a dominant cultural group, which is the majority in the society, those groups, the politicians, the religion, the race, not necessarily the race, but the heterosexual part, the politicians, whoever is the dominant part of the cultural group. And then we have co-cultural groups, which is the minority, the ethnicity, and of course the sexual orientation. What should they do when it comes to a dominant cultural group in the society? Should they try to become part of it? Should they try to adapt to it? Or should they just separate themselves? And then those, of course, have costs and benefits. When doing so, should they do this in a non-assertive way, an assertive way, or aggressive way? Non-assertive, we could also just as a slash, but when you're using it in an exam or test, you will put non-assertive, but I'll just say for now, so a passive way. Assertive being more balanced and the preferable way usually, and then of course aggressive, which we do know. They're saying here how should they approach it, and in our next clip we'll go into the co-cultural communication orientations.